Paul Chabot in San Diego. He served as an advisor to a former White House drug czar, two White House drug czars actually, and founded the Coalition for a Drug-Free California.
Al Jazeera, Buenos Aires.
Let's get more on the legalization debate. Let's have one of our own. We're joined by Paul Chabot in San Diego. He served as an advisor to a former White House drug czar, two White House drug czars actually, and founded the Coalition for a Drug-Free California. And here in Washington, Sanho Tree, he's the director of the Drug Policy Project at the Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Chabot, if I could begin with you. Vicente Fox, then, the latest senior former politician, former Mexican president, to come out and say, look, legalization is the answer. Many other law enforcement officials and former presidents have said very much the same thing. As someone who's staunchly opposed to legalization, at the very least, doesn't that give you some pause?
You know, it's very disappointing to hear what the previous president of Mexico said. If you look at Felipe Calderon today in Mexico, taking on these very violent drug cartels, what's happening is we're seeing a lot of violence because Mexico's doing the right thing and fighting these drug cartels. And when you fight these very vicious organizations, you're going to see a lot more murders, a lot more violence as you're trying to break apart
28,000 dead in 4 years, with production pretty much stagnant or at least displaced to other countries, and corruption spread throughout the country, human rights abuses and so forth. This is all working? These are signs it's all working?
You know, I think we have to see it this way. We're up against terror networks. There is no difference between Al-Qaeda or these drug cartels and how they are structured. And what we have down in Mexico are 5 very violent, deadly cartels that torture people and have been doing it for a very long time. We have no choice.
So when you see President Fox then, and Zedillo and Cardozo of Brazil, President Gaviria of Colombia and all these, when they say, look, after they've left office, look, let's be realistic, we have to talk about legalization, do you think they've just lost their mind then?
Well, I think it's very poor decisions. I don't think that they really understand the dynamics of this, because drug cartels don't simply exist just to trade narcotics. They do human smuggling, weapon smuggling. So if you were to legalize narcotics across the board, these organizations are still going to exist because it's all about the money.
Sanho Tree, then, we are missing the point then by simply limiting this to drugs. The point is these are threats to society and entire countries, and they need to be dealt with, these cartels.
You know, when you think about all the bloodshed in Mexico and Colombia and elsewhere, it's important to realize that what these cartels are fighting over, these traffickers are fighting over, are essentially minimally processed agricultural commodities that are really easy to grow and aren't worth a lot. They're worth a couple of pennies per dose. And instead, our drug war provides an unintended price support, an indirect price support for these traffickers that is astronomical. You have to take the profits out of this economy, and then you will get these people to move on to other things, which are much less profitable for them.
Dr. Chabot?
Yeah, we have to look at this through one perspective. We are all parents, we are all community members. What kind of community do we want children to grow up in? Do we want to allow heroin, crack, methamphetamine, pot, everything on our streets? Or do we want to hold the line and give our kids the best opportunity to succeed? And we have to look at what happened here in the United States.
All those substances are on the streets despite the 28,000 people who've been killed in the last 4 years.
Sure, and they're always going to be there. It's the same with crime, and that's a great point. Just because we have crime on our streets, we're never going to eliminate it. It's always going to be there. We can control it the best of our ability, but because we have violent crime, do we just raise the white flag and say, take the cops off the streets too because we can't get crime off our streets? No, we stay in the fight.
That is a red herring argument. I mean, the way the drug warriors phrase this debate is that they set up a very simple dichotomy. Either you're in favor of zero tolerance in the drug war and prohibition, or you're accused of wanting to sell heroin and candy machines to children. In fact, there's a whole spectrum of regulatory possibilities in between that we're not allowed to talk about. And unfortunately, voters in the United States like simple solutions. Who are the good guys? Which team do we root for? They like simple binary options, but in fact, there's a whole spectrum of regulatory possibilities that we need to talk about.
Sanho Tree, I mean, you bring up the United States. It's all very well for Latin American and countries in Mexico to be talking about legalization, but as long as the demand in the United States and the United Kingdom and elsewhere is still there, as long as there are these export markets, won't the bloodshed still continue even if it is legalized in Mexico?
It would take the problem out of Mexico because there would be very little profit to make in Mexico. It's the risk reward for these traffickers. The more we escalate the drug war, the more valuable the drugs become.
But won't they be fighting for the export markets, even if the domestic market is legal?
No, I think the struggle will move into the U.S. borders and take the pressure off of Mexico, because there wouldn't be much risk in fighting in Mexico over something that's legal.
Dr. Chabot, then I suppose that's another reason why you probably don't want it legalized, because you don't want the problem to cross the border.
Look, let me give you a really great point. 7 years ago, we had a methamphetamine epidemic here in the United States. We took significant controls after the precursor chemicals. Methamphetamine laboratories dropped in this country by 90%. Where do those meth labs go? Down to Mexico. If you control and fight and dismantle these organizations, we can win the tide. We cannot give up. We cannot afford to give up.
Sano Tree, though, there is this discussion about legalization in California, that to try and at least treat it as a health problem, not a criminal problem, try and reduce demand, which is in the end what this is all about. Do you think these initiatives will have much chance?
Yes, when these things are put directly to the people tend to reject the war on drugs. It's our politicians that are the problem. They care more about re-election than about having a rational drug discussion. If you took a straw poll in Congress today, if it was anonymous, I think the drug war would end tomorrow. But what they're afraid of is being attacked at re-election time through these swift boat type ads.
Paul Chabot, then what about that argument then? This militarized, criminalized approach hasn't really helped at all. Let's start treating this as a health problem. That may actually reduce demand and indeed take some of the burden off the prison system in the United States, among other things, as well as the violence elsewhere.
I disagree. First off, we don't call it a war on drugs. Only folks on the far left do. We look at this as an education, prevention, treatment, and enforcement problem. You're working at 4 angles to make this problem smaller, and we have. Drug usage today is about half of what it was a generation ago. However, we have more kids entering drug rehab for marijuana than for all other drugs combined. And I am in California, and I think voters are going to defeat the marijuana legalization effort that's coming to us for a vote in November. Because if you look at what already happened here with these so-called medical marijuana cards, where you can legitimately smoke marijuana under California law, it's become a joke. There's more than 1,000. Yes, there's more than 1,000 pot stores on the streets of Los Angeles.
And our satellite window is about to end, so I'm going to stop you there, but thank you both very much. Sano Tree, Paul Chabot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Time for another break. When we return, waiting for aid in Darfur. Life in the camps as people hope for pledges of aid money that have yet to arrive.